Okay, so our next talk is with Gerard and Ramya Venkataramu. I came really close. Ryan is currently a senior QA engineer at Symantec. He has a BS in computer science and engineering from UCLA and is currently pursuing his MS in information security. Ryan's particular specialties are in web technology and security testing, although his interests span kernel-level technologies to process improvements to data analysis. Ramya is a software engineer at HP. She's completed her master's degree in computer science at San Jose State University in California, and her major technical area of interest lies in the security field. So please help me in welcoming Ramya and Ryan.
All right, thank you very much for coming. First off, I have to apologize for the excessively long title in your handout. We were trying to get the attention of the selection committee, and looks like it worked. So, yay. Thank you, Alan, for the introduction. My name is Gerard. I'm with Symantec in the Security 2.0 group. It's a relatively new group that works mainly in the web security space. My partner here is Ramya.
Hello, I'm Ramya. Until recently, I was on Ryan's team, and it's just a very short while ago I moved to HP. But I guess we could get started on automated test hygiene, our idea of it.
Yes. So today we wanted to talk to you about reputation systems, especially reputation systems in the test environment. We believe that there are a lot of applications of reputation systems that can be introduced within our work environments. And today we wanted to highlight one particular application that we've been working on and thinking about and prototyped about test hygiene, which I'll get to in a minute. So just brief agenda. We'll go over the problem, our suggested solution, a brief overview of reputation systems, and sort of our implementation of it, and some concluding thoughts. So here's the very high level, 37,000 feet view of the problem that we're looking at. So we have a nice large suite of tests that will run. They either pass or fail. But how do you evaluate whether those tests are useful or effective tests in the first place? It's very possible that half of your tests really, don't do much. Check the title of a page, aren't very useful. So before we get into like a philosophical discussion on what a good test is, I'll tell you what we're talking about when we discuss a good test. But these are our assumptions that we're going on. That it's a good test is a test that is useful, as judged by the community at large, easily reproduced and executed, something that's readable, something that has clear steps. Well, if you're doing automated code, that it's well commented, and that it basically accomplishes what it states to accomplish, which isn't definitely not always the case. So we're saying that tests that have these traits have a good test hygiene. So looking at the problem of test hygiene, according to my team. So we've come up with this definition, which eventually we'll get it on Wikipedia, promise. So test hygiene refers to the reproducibility and usefulness of your tests, your test documentation, and your test code. Your tests being, hopefully something that's entered in like some sort of test management system that describes the test and the steps you have to take, the expected results, et cetera. So why is this problem important? Why should you care? So generally, and this is not always the case, but we'd say it's the exception that tests are peer-reviewed. So the rule being generally tests are not peer-reviewed. I believe we let poor tests slide much more than poor source code. Actually, in Simon's last presentation, he was saying that we should let test code have the same quality as production code, and I agree completely. However, I think that's a difficult battle, mainly because the production code, the test code, is going to be introduced to the public, either through a interpreter or some sort of compiled binary, and hence, since it's outside of that walled garden, it's going to be given much more importance. We believe this reduces the quality of the system in general. We're thinking of it as the weakest link problem, right? If you have a set of tests and some of them aren't useful or stale or not updated, it's very possible that this could eventually lead to bigger problems down the line, it's hard to trace one-to-one. It's more of a sort of systematic view of things and the overall quality. So the breaking it down to the very context of the problem that we're dealing with. So we're looking at tests that are either difficult to reproduce or generally not useful as judged by the community. If we have tests or test code that are not being peer-reviewed or updated as often as the source code tests, I think that point is more true than not. I think source code is updated quite frequently, and the tests that test that source code are probably not as updated as quickly. Also, test documentation of poor quality. So our solution is applying a reputation system to the test environment. So essentially, let the community rate and decide whether or not these tests or the documentation are useful and well written. So we put down, sort of public shaming, air out your dirty laundry. Find the tests that are poorly rated and, try and fix them. So our overall goal is improved test hygiene and even higher, improved quality of the system. Better written tests, more useful tests, better documentation, better written test code. So now that we've talked a little bit about how we want to solve the problem using reputation systems in the test environment, we're going to digress a little and talk about reputation systems in general. According to Wikipedia, we have it's quotes saying reputation is a social evaluation and a method of social control, which I find interesting. Evaluation in particular, what this means is we're trying to measure something that's very subjective, something such as test quality or how well written is test documentation. Measurement of such abstract ideas is difficult at best. So this is one method to help you do that. And an efficient mechanism of social control is important in that enforcing these mechanisms, enforcing test hygiene in the test environment is difficult. It's costly in terms of time. You can have all sorts of peer reviews and have individuals go through all of their tests, but it's going to cost human time, which is an important asset. So what other people have said on this subject, it's a fantastic book, The Wisdom of Crowds. Recommend reading it if you're interested in the ideas of reputation systems or collective intelligence. So I'm not going to go into his things in depth, but here are the 4 elements that James Surowiecki says you need to have a wise crowd, quote unquote. In particular, I think the internet is a great mechanism for a few of these, including independence and decentralization and aggregation. You can independently rate your tests in a decentralized manner all over the place and have them aggregated in one database somewhere where they can be analyzed. Reputation, as we all know, is a great motivator in our society. We see direct economic benefits in some systems, such as eBay and Amazon. Status, it provides status for us in different systems, such as Slashdot and LinkedIn. Or it provides trust, making trust between you and third parties, which is important when you have little data to go on other than what people have said. So just a brief look at some of the online reputation systems that we're probably familiar with. So look at eBay. We have one seller here, 26,000 ratings, 99.4% positive, and he's been around since '99. That's pretty good. Just from this data alone, assuming that eBay hasn't hacked this guy's, hasn't modified this guy's ratings, I would trust him as a seller. This is important data. Amazon's reputation system's a little bit more product-focused. We see 42 reviews for Donald Knuth's famous set of books. I would say that's probably, with 4.5 stars and 42 reviews, that's probably a good box set to buy. It's quite expensive, though, so I warn you now. On the status side of things, Slashdot, by contributing articles, comments, etc., they affect your karma levels. These levels actually used to be real numbers, but they've since eliminated that, and you get these generic names. As you see, I haven't contributed much. Very neutral. An important thing to keep in mind is that reputation in any environment is all relative. So we just looked at this seller. Pretty good stats, I'd say. but if you compare them to a seller that has twice the number of ratings in half the time, even though they're probably both awesome, I would definitely buy from the second one. So what is the effect of the reputation systems in our environment? Trust is established based on what the community has voted on. There's direct economic decisions that are made based on what data has been provided to you. And also, social judgments are made based on, let's say in the Slashdot, if one person's karma is higher than another, and you're comparing two comments, whether you like it or not, you will probably have a bias to rate the person with the higher karma as more legitimate, for whatever reason. So, in summary, to keep in mind, people care about their reputations, and reputations as a mean of evaluation and measurement in subjective areas and a way of control. And I don't mean control in a bad way. And control is in sort of enforcement, a slight prodding, hopefully. It's also used as a method to build trust between you and someone that you really have no idea who it is. So now, how can we use this to our advantage in the test environment? So one thing first to keep in mind is, right now we believe that there's, for the most part, an implicit trust that the tests that are being used and checked in are useful and necessary. Enforcement to make sure that this is the case is costly in terms of time. You can, as I said earlier, you can go over each test case individually, you can review each piece of source code, but it's going to cost a lot of time. And reputation can help enforce this hygiene. It can help reduce the amount of time that you spend. So let's talk about your stakeholders. What's in it for you? Why should you care? Well, for testers, in this industry, there's a high turnover rate. It's sort of a fact of life. So inevitably, you're going to be taking over somebody's tests. And it would be nice, tests and test code and test documentation, et cetera. So it'd be nice to receive that data and have it be of high quality and not have to contact the last 3 people who may have worked on this and ask them, what happened, what's changed, this test doesn't work, documentation's not updated, et cetera, et cetera. So you can understand other people's tests when you inevitably take them over. For developers, I think it establishes more trust. If you can see that if the person testing your feature or product has a higher reputation as judged by the community, or the tests that are being run against your product have a high rating, you can feel more confident that it's probably going to result in a higher quality product going out. And inevitably, that's what you want, right? I mean, if your name is attached to the product, you want it to be of high quality. And for managers, we have another evaluation metric that you can be used, something else to measure your people and the product against. I have to note, you have to love the Microsoft PowerPoint clip art. I type in the word manager, and it brings up the stuffy banker with a pipe coming out of his mouth. So, awesome. So before I get into the algorithm and the prototype that we created, I just want to preface this by, I'll be realistic. Quantifying reputation is difficult. It's sort of very subjective, and there are biases all over the place. And it depends a lot on the attributes that you want to measure for reputation. And you have to remember reputation is all relative, so it really doesn't mean anything unless everyone's using the same system and they're compared against each other. And also, what we introduced to you is our own algorithm, what we're using, what works for our team. Highly recommend that you come up with your own methods to evaluate someone's reputation in the test environment. So, the basic idea that we came up with is to mine test data, go through some of our testing systems, test case management system, and source code control systems, and mine some of the attributes, put them in a database. On top of that, there's specific actions that we think should be rewarded, things like executing other people's tests. That's something probably not as common and should be rewarded with maybe higher points or however it is you want to do. And then apply this data to a scoring algorithm. So in particular, we were looking at the test case management system, the source control system, and a set of test actions. So here are the attributes that we went through and decided to save, to mine and save in a database. The basic ratings of the test cases, of course, the number that you've written, the number that you've automated, the number that you've executed, the age of the test case. Obviously, older tests will probably have a higher likelihood of being stale than more recent tests, or ones that haven't been updated as frequently. Our source control system, number of check-ins that you've made for automated test cases or documentation. We're going under the assumption that more check-ins means that it's probably more updated and more recent, and of, hopefully higher quality. We also looked at the age of the test cases and the documentation. And then there are specific actions that we thought should be rewarded in this environment. Not only rewarded, but to help provide motivation to actually use the system. Executing other people's tests and rating other people's tests, in particular, is important for the system to work. So it should be an action that people get some sort of benefit from. Also, fixing other people's documentation or source code or test cases, as well as commenting on people's test cases, creating more of a test community in this reputation environment. So maybe the value of one person's comment over another could be weighed in a more complex system, but we just wanted to reward the fact that you are commenting is something that should be noted. So here's our super basic, simple algorithm. The scoring tool goes to the attributes and assigns points to the things that it finds. So 2 points. So the way we rated them is by level of importance that we see. For us, we think executing other people's test cases is the most important action and should be rewarded higher points, mainly because it takes more time, and time being the most valuable asset here that we're working with. When you rate other people's test cases, that's a rather easy operation. Go, click, done, right? But executing another person's test case, depending on level of difficulty, can take minutes to hours. And then also some small rewards for rating and executing test cases that are your own, but that should be done, obviously. That was something that we discussed, and we thought, well, maybe it's something that's assumed that people are doing it, but who knows? Also, some reward for your average test case rating. If you have a high rating, there should be some sort of benefit to you. And then a small penalty for the age, if you have test cases that are old. For the source control rating, again, we went with the same idea of rewarding changes made to other people's documentation and test cases first, and then small rewards for yourself and some penalties for aging. We went over a matter of months, but feel free, change it to whatever aging system you think is better, that works better for your system. Now, we did a very simple algorithm. Your reputation is your 2 ratings combined. It gives us something to compare us against, at least. So, some very basic notes from this system. Yes, absolutely. This can be a system that can be gamed. I think any reputation system can be modified. I think a lot of it depends, though, on what importance you put on this system in your environment. If this system ends with, every quarter the person with the highest reputation gets a raise and a promotion, then yes, you better bet on people gaming your system. People are going to go and just rate test cases, that they haven't even looked at and say they've executed stuff. It's going to happen. So I think the level of importance that you put on this system is something to note. Mostly, this is an introduction to the idea. We wanted to point out how reputation systems could be used and a method that we've prototyped to use internally. So let's go into a little bit about our implementation. So in order to mine the test data we have to have access to the databases, or the data for our source control and our test case management system. So those are 2 areas that we pulled data from into another table that the reputation tool can then access. we modified our test case management system somewhat. Our test case management system is an internal tool, web-based, that, it's sort of the PHP MySQL stack. So we had full access to it, luckily, and could make modifications like this. If you don't, that could be a crink in your plans, but hopefully you do. It's simple JavaScript that then sends the data to a database such that we can later use it in our reputation scoring tool. So you see, this is sort of a highly simplified view of the table. Your test case, the rating, and who rated it. Also, it allows you to pull the current rating when you go back to the test case. So if you go back and you've already rated it, it'll show you your rating. It'll also show you the average rating. So then we implemented a simple reputation scoring tool in PHP that would go and grab the data, apply our simple algorithm, and then send that reputation data back into the database to be stored and then shared. The tool is triggered on various actions. When check-ins are made, when test cases are added or modified or updated or executed, in each of those cases, your reputation score is reevaluated and resaved. There were some bumpy roads along the way. The first to note is that integrating the systems is not easy. Not necessarily easy. If you are using a proprietary third-party test case management system or a hosted system and you don't have access to this data directly, that could be a problem. That could be a problem. Luckily, we did. Also, some attributes are easier to obtain than others. So, for instance, number of test cases was an easy one to grab for us. But age of test cases may not be so easy. I mean, whether we look at date of conception or last time it was updated, not all that information may be saved. So some of the attributes, you'll have to define for yourself what works and what doesn't. Some of them may not work for you. Also, simply defining and weighting attributes we found to be a source of much discussion. We spent a lot of time figuring out, we had a huge list initially of attributes that could be weighted. And then we narrowed it down for the tool and for the talk. And then also figuring out which ones are more important than others. How should they be weighted? It's very subjective, and it's essentially up to you to determine for your project or your team which ones are the most important. Another thing to think about is how do you evaluate such a reputation system? How do you know that it's working? How do you know that it actually is improving the system? All right, because that's the end goal. So we came up with a few things that we want to look at and are looking at. Increased activity within the community. If we see more tests, a gradually increase in the number of tests being rated week over week, or number of users, if the pie is getting larger, if more users are actually entering the system to rate data, that's another good metric to look at. Also, we're hoping to see, we're going into the assumption that initially the ratings will probably be lower, and hopefully things will be going up eventually. Test case ratings, user reputation data. Hopefully we'll see a gradual increase. Also, as I said earlier, we think it's an important attribute is how many test cases are being executed that aren't your own. So that's one specific thing that we want to track, that we think will help create the more quality in the system. So other possible uses for reputation systems in basic work environments. The first, I think most obvious one in the test environment is applying this to defect tracking systems, your bug tracking. Actually, initially we did have the bug tracking system within this presentation and talking about some of the different attributes that you could have, but we pulled it out because we wanted to focus more on the idea and less on the implementation. I think it's a little, more obvious once I just tell you, applying reputation to bug tracking. Are these bugs of high quality? Are they well written? As judged by the community, and then using that data, incorporating it into a reputation algorithm. That's something that hopefully, if you have access to the source code and can modify your bug tracking system. That's something that could be made. Code hygiene. So we were looking at, we were thinking about, oh, this could be applied to the development environment as well. Certainly, so code reviews are sort of standard, right? Everyone does code reviews. However, the initial impression, I think, of that code review, that sort of gut feeling, is lost after the code review. So having some way to evaluate the code and say, okay, overall, how do you feel about it? 2 stars, 3 stars, applying some sort of some way to measure the quality of the code in terms of sort of what your gut tells you. Is it of good quality? Do you think it's going to be a good product that goes out eventually? The last one was a little bit more for laughs initially, sort of a management hygiene. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought it might actually be an interesting idea. I'm under the impression that most managers probably don't have a very valid or good idea of how they're actually doing. And having some way for the anonymous way for people to come and tell them, hey, you're only getting 2 stars out of 5. It might be some sort of indicator, at least, some way for management to say, oh, well, apparently people don't think we're doing as well as we should, without having to come up to your manager and saying, hey, you're doing a terrible job, sorry. So providing some sort of indicator for them to say, okay, well, obviously something's going on. It's something I should investigate. Also, we were thinking the next logical conclusion is applying reputation systems, not to users, but to actual components and systems. So having a method, some sort of web-based interface where you can go on and say, well, the parser's awesome, but the lexical analyzer sucks. So there's a way to rate that and say, oh, 0 stars, sorry. This is important, I think, in terms of, at least for management, in terms of risk analysis. If the community as a group decides that one component is of lower quality than another, it's probably something you should look into. If you're going to be allocating resources, this is another data point to look at and say, well, apparently the group thinks this one is not so good. Maybe we should put our new developer on here. Or maybe we should look at refactoring the code over here. Also, looking at individual components, then these can be applied higher up the stack to full products or features. And this can be either done as in an automated fashion where you take the different reputations of components and then determine, well, from all these component reputations, now we have a system reputation. Or it could be done on its own as, here's a system, vote on it. What do you think? Rate it. So some notes on involvement. So we think this is generally only going to be useful if you have a large and or active community. Actually, I think active community is probably more important than the size of your community, only because if, let's say, this is a system that's introduced by management, you probably won't have a lot of choice on the size of your community, right? It's going to be your team. So let's talk about what gets people active, what gets them motivated into the system. How do we get more people involved? We think the best way to do this is to actually make sure that the reputation is referenced and used, meaning in meetings or when decisions are made, you can say, well, look, the reputation of this component or this test case is rather low. It's something we should look into. If it's not used, no one's going to take it seriously. Also, it's good to highlight the people that are active in the community. I think we've seen this all over the web, where the very tightly knit communities are ones where the most active users are rewarded. For instance, like Yelp, I know that they will send very active users. They'll have Yelp parties. They send T-shirts and such. That encourages a very tight-knit community. So basically, which one has a high reputation to mean something? And whether a low reputation means something as well is up to you. So again, looking at what other people have said about when sort of these collective intelligence projects don't work. I won't go too in-depth into each one, what James Surowiecki says in Wisdom of Crowds, but the one that I think is most interesting and most important, at least in the tech industry, is too emotional. Because I think everyone has their what they believe are the best practices, the best tools, the best technologies, the best languages that should be used. Generally, these arguments get very emotional. So it's something to keep in mind. So to conclude, we believe that the reputation systems in any work environment will help provide more accountability for the output. Also, it helps identify different areas of risk and hopefully improves the test hygiene and quality of the system overall. And that's the goal in the end. We want to save human hours while reducing risk and increasing productivity, right? That's the dream. So this has to be done in incremental ways, and we think this is one system that can help achieve that goal. And if you have any questions, we'll be happy to take them. Thank you.
I can just yell.
Sorry.
Oh, right.
Sorry.
EAV.
Something, this is very interesting. I wanted to ask maybe a clarification question. Do you make a distinction, or as you guys have tried to implement this, is there a distinction between the quality of, or the reputation, let's say, of the tester and the reputation of the test as an artifact? Like,
Yes. So the way we implemented it was we didn't actually have a reputation of the test. We had a rating. So the way you could rate a test, the way we did it is a simple 1 to 5 stars system, right? How well do you think it is? So that is independent of the user reputation, which then that's the test rating is one data point that is applied to the user reputation. Does that make sense?
yeah, just a quick follow-on.
Okay.
Is there any usefulness in, like, the thing that I zeroed in on in your talk was this idea of actively rating your test space, you know, and just that as something that fleshes out what we mean when we talk about the quality of our tests. That is a comment, I guess, more than anything. That to me seems really interesting and useful.
Right.
Not that the other stuff isn't.
Yeah.
But, so.
I mean, going back and not just rating, but reviewing old tests is important. So some motivator to do that
Yeah,
would be nice.
And by providing comments, generally people get to know what was wrong with their tests instead of just, keeping it to themselves. Usually when you go through a test that someone else has done, when you take over a component, you're like, why did you do all this, So if somebody had those comments beforehand, it makes it better. That's what we thought.
Yeah, so one follow-up kind of to that question is that I do think that you're really running into difficulty when you start applying this to people. The kind of operative users of the reputation system, I think, should be the tests themselves. They get points whenever they discover a bug due to that particular test, or they lose points whenever they fail for no particular reason, that sort of thing. And, have the reputation be attached to the tests themselves rather than the testers, because you're really going to get into a lot more system gaming whenever the people have the points, I think.
Yeah, definitely agreed. And actually, Ramya pointed out earlier that in the agile world, what was it?
Well, in the agile world, it says the same thing, that if, say, developers develop code and if there's some bug found in that code, then that bug should be fixed by any developer, not necessarily the one who owns that component. Because the idea is to detach the code from the developer and to prevent people from getting too emotional over, so in that kind of a system, if you prefer to implement that, then it's better to have the reputation attached to the tests actually, and not point fingers at people and say, okay, this guy who has possibly a lower rating for some reason, which we do not know, is not good. I mean, that's not the whole idea. The idea is to get better tests out of people.
Right, and also, in general, just introducing the reputation systems into the work environment really is the goal. So certainly you can, I think you're right. You can run into problems when you introduce user reputation. But that's, if anyone's going to be implementing this, it's something you can cut out, absolutely. Keep it just to test cases.
So, another question, did you actually try out that reputation thing in your company, and did you measure the impact somehow?
Right,
if so, how? And so, I have a second question.
We knew this was coming, yeah. No, we have a prototype, but it hasn't been in practice for very long, and it's only been our team. So we don't have a lot of data yet, unfortunately.
Okay, and my second question was about people who cheat the system. because there is a vicious cycle in the whole setup. If it doesn't mean anything, people won't cheat it. If it means something, people will cheat it. So,
Yeah.
But it doesn't bring any benefit anymore because people cheat it anyway. How can we get out of this?
Right. Yeah. So I think this goes back to the level of importance that you put on this reputation, right? Because so you're putting it in sort of a binary way. Either it means something or it doesn't. However, we think it can mean something, but not necessarily, a promotion, right? Not something huge, but.
But then you will just bring people to cheat a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I think we see that in any online system, right? In any system where there's voting or rating, what have you, eBay, Dig, Amazon, there's going to be people who try and cheat the system. I think that's a reality that will have to be dealt with in another talk.
So when you evaluate a book, you know that the book will never change. When you evaluate a software, you know that the software will change. So how do you deal with subversion, with new version of the same? For example, you write a review, you evaluate a test case, and then somebody fixes that test case. So what do you do? Do you discard all the previous review? Or in which way do you keep adequacy between the new version and the previous evaluation?
What was the last sentence I read?
So you're asking, let's say, how do ratings apply to old versions compared to new ones?
Exactly. So I rate something and the rate is really low. Then I refactor everything. Shall I discard all the previous rating or shall I keep them?
We had that system, right? The diagram in which it triggers a change.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, in our system, when you update, it triggers a change in the reputation itself. But I think he's asking about the quality, the rating of the source code. So I guess, so that's a good point. So it's something we should probably put in our system as a way to note which version that this rating applies to, right? Either, two test cases, 2 times 2 ratings, 2 versions ago, et cetera. Something like that. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, something good to note.
Okay.
A question here. So how does the quality of the product system affect the reputation score of the system, the reputation?
That's the quality of the product.
Let's say if you have all this nice system. So if the product released and you found a bunch of bugs and people's feedback is very low quality, even though the reputation score may be reasonable or pretty good. So would that decrease the score of the QA?
Actually, so in terms of bugs, that's one thing that we did have when we had the defect tracking system in here is when you find bugs after it's been released, that's a large negative against the reputation score.
So you do have the effect onto your reputation
it was an
system.
idea that we discussed,
so
definitely.
Can you, I don't know, do you have a system to evaluate the quality of the product, or system? How do you measure the quality of a product? How do you say this is very good quality software released, or say it's not that good?
Yeah. Using this system, we would use just simple rating mechanism. So this would be quality as judged by the community. I mean, whether you want to look at objective quality, I think that's going to be tough, depending on whatever metrics you want to use. But using this system in particular, which has its biases, absolutely. I think any system like this will have some biases. It's going to be up to the group to decide what they think the quality is.
So I'm just curious, so kind of as a follow-up to this question, you said you don't have a lot of data yet, but what are some of the impacts you expect to see from this? Does the reputation of the software under development, do you expect that to directly correlate to the actual quality? I mean, similar to that once it launches? What process changes do you expect to see from?
Yeah, hopefully the product will get better, but that's I think that's going to be hard to measure, because what you'd have to do to compare product quality, right? You'd have to take the product without this system versus the product with this system, and we're not going to be branching off. But what we hope to see is a gradual increase in the ratings of the test cases. And these rating systems not just confined to our QA group. It can be open to anyone, product managers, development, et cetera. If they want to go and review test cases, they certainly can. so we hope to see the quality of the test cases going up, the quality of the test source code going up. And then it's sort of we have our fuzzy theory is that if the quality if the test quality goes up, the overall system quality will go up, which hopefully creates a better product.
And we hope that testers are more conscious and look into these details in particular when they write the test code and look at all aspects more deeply because they know the community is watching them. They're not alone anymore.
I think this is a pretty neat idea, but I was distressed a few months back when my sister showed me a paper which argues that on eBay that there's a lot of grade inflation in the ratings. This makes me think this whole evaluation thing is more complicated than I realized. Thank you.
Yeah, and you're right. Yeah, it is. And I think eBay and Amazon have both been combating people trying to game their systems. It's a tough
gaming.
Yeah.
Just easy grading.
Oh, easy grading. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's true. That's possible. I think it depends on your implementation of your scoring algorithm. I think ours is probably generous.
Yeah.
But again, it's all relative. So, like I showed you earlier, we have two sellers, one with 56,000 votes, one with 26,000. They're probably both good, but we're going to go with the one with more votes anyway.
Hi. Yeah, at the back. So it seems like this is, obviously rating is a time-consuming activity. It's going to take some cycles of your time in the week or in a given period of time that people have typically for tests. So you have a number of activities. You have, writing documents, analyzing code, writing tests, etc. And all these things are sort of slotted in your schedule. So can you guys talk a little bit about what patterns you saw in people spending time on doing these rating activities? Were they just grouped on the weekends where people just did it at their free time? Or was it a slotted activity saying, I'll do it right after writing every test, etc.? Or was there a pattern or something like that?
Right. A little bit of both. I mean, we had times where it was like, spend half an hour rating some of your tests and other people's tests. But I guess as a policy, what we wanted to do is say, when you execute your test or someone else's test, rate it immediately afterwards. So that was sort of the policy we put in place.
Hi. One of the practices in testing is to have a standard set of regression tests against pre-existing software and existing software features that carry forwards into your next versions. So you have your new feature tests and your regression tests. Under the scoring system, how do the regression tests fare, and how do the authors of these regression tests fare?
Okay, interesting. Well, so considering that these tests are run more than any other, they definitely are given not more weight, but a little bit more public, right? Everyone will know that these are more important tests since they're run more frequently. I don't know off the top of my head how the ratings, at least in our prototype, how the ratings of our regression tests were, but at least as far as I know, there's nothing against the authors, if that's what you're getting at. Like if we have a low regression test, go talk to the author. I think it's more of on an honor system. If you see that your tests are of low ratings, then it's something you should get to eventually, something you should clean up. Sort of an indicator, right? Who's when you get to it, sort of like you have to make time for automation. You're going to have to make time to clean up your tests eventually.
Yeah, but the aging score, if you apply the aging score to regression tests, has been around maybe a year and a half. Very low.
Sure. Okay, that's true. So maybe that's another piece of the system that you have to account for. Something that indicates, if this is a regression test, change the aging score to be something different, on the order of months or 6 months, et cetera.
Okay, couple of questions here. Okay, first I have to support that what that guy says, that easy grading system is really a pitfall for your system. Grade me well, grade you well, and that can create a bubble, and all the evaluation system goes down, which is a bubble.
Right. So actually, that reminds me of something that actually coming back to the book, The Wisdom of Crowds. So you're right, easy grading, I think is a problem when your name is attached to it. So one of the things that he mentions is independence being important. Independence meaning anonymity. So if no one knows what you've rated, then you're more likely to rate more truthfully.
Okay.
And that's an assumption that he makes.
And what about the subversion things? I mean, one guy over there mentioned, I think was over there, yeah, mentioned that when it comes to miniversion, at some point in your talk, you said that then the group doesn't have to be big; it have to be a quality group. But if you have miniversion, mini subversion, at some point, you have to have numbers, so your rating means something.
Sorry, could you go over that last part again?
Okay, if you have miniversion, subversion, and et cetera, okay, you have a small group, your rating will mean nothing.
Sure, unless we keep track of the average rating over time. So right now we have average rating, but it's not over time, so that's another good piece to implement in the system. Then it will show rating as it's sort of progressed, as the versions update.
All right, well, thank you very much. We're actually back on schedule, everyone. So we've got a 8-minute break here, and we'll resume at 12:30. Thanks, Ryan and Ramya.
Thank you.